Hello, everybody, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Shay, and this is a channel where I talk about horror media, horror movies, horror TV shows, horror anything, and theme parks because I live in Central Florida and I feel like it would be a crime not to. If you're not new here, welcome back. This is actually a different video than what I planned if you couldn't tell by the thumbnail. Just a quick disclaimer. I have been having some serious issues with technology. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. My computer has like barely anything on it, but it acts like it's so full of stuff. And I'm like, dude, I have an external hard drive for all of this. I don't know what your issue is. Last week, I did record my interview with the vampire review. First of all, it was one of the most strenuous recordings I've ever had to do. And the reason why is because my camera kept freezing, my mic kept going out, my OBS kept crashing, and on top of that, my cat decided that it was playtime at like 9 o'clock at night and decided that she was going to start knocking over everything that I own because, God forbid, I tried to make a video rather than stopping everything I'm doing and playing with her. And then also my echo kept going off because people kept walking back and forth in front of my house, apparently, which was really weird because usually this time of night it's very quiet, and it was like a Thursday night, I think. So I was really shocked that there were so many people walking back and forth in front of my house. But we're going to try tonight to record a video, and I'm going to try to get it up for you guys. If you're seeing this, it is Wednesday, October 23rd, and hopefully you'll be seeing this on Thursday, October 24th. The other thing is about the interview with the vampire video. I know I talked about it in my last video. I edited the whole thing, took the whole week to really work on it and get it, the way I wanted it to be, which wasn't great because I had so many issues with my camera and my mic. But I edited everything. I was getting ready to load it out and upload it today so that it would be ready for tomorrow because I always try to release my videos on Thursdays. I don't know why. And it accidentally just erased the entire thing. Like, I can't find it anywhere on my computer. So, after basically wallowing in my frustration for a good 10 to 15 minutes, I decided, you know what? We're going to still get a video out this week. Interview with the vampire will probably have to wait till my next few videos. We're going to get a video out this week, and we're going to talk about something that is a hot topic right now. And no, we're not going to talk about the new one because I haven't seen it yet because it's still in theaters. But I did just watch Terrifier 2 for the first time last night. Round of applause for me because I have been sort of hesitant to watch this movie, and now after watching it, I don't really know why, but we'll get into it. So the plan I had was I was going to watch Terrifier 2, watch Terrifier 3, and then do a review of all three movies, talk about which one's my favorite in the trilogy. But in the interest of actually having content this month on the channel, I decided let me just strike that plan, and we will do another full comprehensive review of the third one, and then I'll tell you where they stack up once I've seen the third one. But for now, we're going to just review the first two because I have some stuff I want to say. I want to talk about this. Hopefully it won't be a super duper long video, just for you guys' sake, because my interview with the vampire video is definitely going to have to be a two-parter, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, so if you are interested, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll get started on today's creepy critique. Heard of the Terrifier movies, first of all, you must live under a rock. Second of all, I'm here to break that streak for you because I am going to talk about the Terrifier movies. Terrifier is interesting because it is an indie film that has sort of started to dominate like the horror community. I haven't seen this much love for like an indie film in the horror capacity since Trick or Treat, which that didn't come till many years later, which I guess in a way you can say the same about Terrifier because the original Terrifier was released in 2016, and this one, the second one, was released in 2022, so it's a pretty sizable age gap. That's a pretty sizable gap in time. But between 2022's Terrifier 2 release and 2024's Terrifier 3 release, I feel like this movie has gone even more overboard. And I think that has a lot to do with social media. We'll get into it a little bit later. But art is everywhere. In my last video, I talked about how Ice Nine Kills just recently released a song that is actually in the movie Terrifier 3 for Terrifier called A Work of Art. Again, great song, fantastic video. Love, love, love it. Love everything that those guys do. Big ups to them. Um, like so yeah, they released a song. I also showed you a clip of art going to Spirit Halloween, and there's like Spirit Halloween has an animatronic of Art the Clown. They have costumes. They have their own Spirit Halloween t-shirt with Art the Clown on it, which has been like, I don't work at Spirit Halloween this year. Haven't worked there in years, but I can imagine it's a big seller because every single time I go into Spirit Halloween, I cannot find that shirt. If anyone, I'm sure it's going to be on some like reseller site for like an insanely ridiculous price. Um, I really hope that's not the case because I kind of hope they bring the shirt back next year because that shirt is cool. If I can find a picture of it, I'll insert the picture. It's a really cool shirt. But art's just kind of exploding like beyond belief, and Terrifier as a series is just kind of exploding to a point where it's like almost inevitable that if you're a horror fan, you probably should watch these movies because someone somewhere at some point is going to ask you, have you seen Terrifier yet? And I'll be the first to say, the Terrifier series is not for everyone. I'm not going to sit here and tell you as a viewer that you should watch the movie if you're not comfortable with extreme amounts of gore. However, I do think it's kind of seminal slasher watching, and to be quite honest, it's one of the few slasher movies for me that has kind of made it so that the slasher subgenre is enjoyable for me again. So yeah, I really think this is like a movie, like a series that has kind of just taken over and just dominated horror. So I'm not gonna really do a full review. I guess I could technically do a full review, but I'm not gonna do too in depth like of my thoughts. I guess I could. I had a podcast that I was working on, and I did review Terrifier, the first Terrifier movie last year. I will leave a link to that video in the description. It's kind of, all over the place for a review from my standpoint, which I guess, I mean, all my reviews are all over the place. But yeah, I kind of like, I did a review of Terrifier 1 last year after I watched it. And it also is going to be interesting probably for you guys to watch if you were to watch that one, because it was right after I had come back from Spooky Empire Con, which is this massive horror con that is in Florida, and I believe it's also in South Carolina now too. Um, it's a massive horror con, and we had just gotten back from that con when we filmed that video, and we saw a Terrifier panel that had like the whole squad was there from Terrifier 2. Well, not the whole squad, but like um the girl who played the pale girl was there. David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown, we'll get into him. Damien Leone was there. I think it was and I think Samantha I think it's Scafidi is her name. Samantha Scafidi, who plays Vicky, the one with the busted up face. She was also there. So that was like, it was like I watched the movie the night before we went to the con for the first time ever in my life, and then like the next day we went to the con and I watched the panel, and I was like, I have such a deep appreciation for what they've done here. Like, love it or hate it, think it's disgusting or whatever you think it is, you can't deny the passion that Damien has for this franchise, and the passion that all of them have for this franchise, and the absolute like work that they've put in to something that could have easily gone nowhere, but now Terrifier 3 is one of the biggest movies in America. It is dominating the box office. And someone did say, oh, it's because Terrifier 3 had nothing to go up against, but when Smile 2 comes out, that's probably going to say, no, Terrifier 3 is still the top movie in the box office right now. So, domestic box office, not worldwide. So, and that's crazy because this is an indie horror film. It does have the biggest budget of the three, but it's still, it's still somewhat of a low budget film. And this is born from, word of mouth, strictly word of mouth, and now the passion that the fandom has for this franchise. So, very clearly, they're showing that you can make a solid franchise out of indie darlings, which is something that major studios don't usually back all the time. So Yeah, let's get into this quick review. Like I said, I will leave the review for that I did last year down in the description because yeah, I'm not gonna go too far into Terrifier, but I will go further into Terrifier 2 because I just saw that last night. So, Terrifier 2. Like I said before, the original Terrifier came out in 2016 and it is currently on Peacock. I just watched it a few days ago. Love that movie. And Terrifier 2 came out on October 6th, 2022, and it is currently on Prime Video to watch for free if you have Amazon Prime. The cast and crew, director, like I said before, is Damien Leone. The cast is David Howard Thornton plays Art the Clown. I mentioned that Samantha Scafidi plays Vicky, who's the survivor, the only survivor from the first movie. Lauren Lavera and Elliot Fulham play Sienna and Jonathan Shaw, who are kind of like Sienna's the final girl and Jonathan is her brother. They're kind of the crux of this franchise now, in Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3. So the critical reception, as you can imagine, for a movie that's incredibly low budget, the first Terrifier movie sits at a 5.6 out of 10 on IMDb and a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Terrifier 2 does a little bit better. It sits at a 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb and an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty cool. The synopsis for this movie is very, very simple, very simplistic. Love it. A crazy clown stalks and tries to kill three women in a wretched old apartment building on Halloween night. That's Terrifier 1. Terrifier 2, resurrected by a sinister entity, Art the Clown returns to Miles County to terrorize a teenage girl and her younger brother on Halloween night. So, yeah, first of all, Art really likes Halloween. He's coming for Michael Myers' crown. Not really, because he's celebrating Christmas in this next one. But very simple, very cut and dry premises. So, as usual with my movie reviews, I like to do good things first and then bad things and then wrap it up in a nice little bow at the end to let you know how I feel about the film. Um, so, for this one, we're going to focus on the good things for Terrifier and then the bad things for Terrifier and then same for Terrifier and Terrifier 2, good and then the bad. So, starting with Terrifier, I think that the first Terrifier movie really does kind of establish Art as a new gen, like a next gen horror icon. Because that movie kind of took a while to find its audience and gain traction. I remember I saw All Hallows Eve, which is where we first ever get to see Art the Clown, many, many years ago. I saw it on like Amazon Prime, watched it on Amazon Prime or something. It was either Amazon Prime or like Netflix. I don't know. I watched it then, and then I saw that there was a movie called Terrifier, and I always kind of meant to watch it, but then I never got around to watch it. And then by the time that I actually like, you know, we had the pandemic that came through, um, I had time to watch Terrifier, but then I had heard that it was super gory, super disgusting. There was the whole bisection scene, and I was like, I don't know if I want to watch that because I'm still not really big on gore, and I get nauseated quite easily. Um, so I was kind of thinking that I would like not like it, so I just kind of stayed away from it a little bit. But I remember like not really hearing much about Art the Clown until the second movie came out. And then the second movie came out and everybody was like going nuts about Art the Clown. So I was like, "Oh, interesting." Like it kind of establishes him as a next gen icon. It doesn't pin him to that status yet, but it's kind of like, hey, this guy can tangle with Freddy, Jason, Leatherface, and Michael Myers. He can sit on the throne with Chucky and the babyface killer, which I think the babyface killer is probably not as prominent as Art the Clown. But he's got legs basically. He's got traction. Um it does get to the point on the violence and gore. It is, to me, the first movie is like, it's like a B-rated splatter flick that you would watch from like the 80s. There's not really any story or character development. It just goes right into here. We're going to establish this whole setting by showing you one of Art's victims in the beginning, showing you her doing a really heinous act, and then we're going to go into the crux of the movie where we see what happened to lead to this point where this victim like exists now. And it just gets to the point. short run time, does what it wants to do and gets it over with like that. Like it does not linger too long. It like breezes through the plot as fast as possible. You have the cat and mouse of Art and first Tara, which is the first final girl who we're rooting for, and then Vicky. You have the kind of cat and mouse between the three of them, and you see Art doing some really gruesome things. The bisection scene, him wearing a woman's chest in her wig, I say her wig, but it was not her wig, and just all the horrible things he does, and it's just kind of like a heinous display of violence, guts, and gore. Um, it does have some really solid like comedic moments. I think this is where like you can see David Howard Thornton, his when I saw their panel last year, he talked about him learning miming when he was learning acting, and how that's what he puts into Art the Clown, and you really see the mime abilities. He also is just so unserious. Like, he's doing all these heinous acts, which are all horrible and scary to watch to some extent. They're very violent, very gruesome, very gory, but he's also kind of goofy while he's doing them. Like, I always go back to my favorite like scene in the entire movie, and I'll put a like a picture up of it, but it's a scene where Tara is leaving the like trying to leave the abandoned apartment building, and she walks out of a room, and she's like turns and she stops, and they kind of linger on her for a minute, and you see the shocked look on her face, and it's like, oh, Art found her, you know that. But when it turns back to him, he's in this pose, and it's so freaking funny to me that this man is just posted up like, and he just stands there for like a good few seconds, and then he starts chasing her, and it's so funny to me. Like, I literally laughed out loud at that part the first time I saw it. There's also the part where at the end he's trying to get Vicky through the fence, and then he's reaching for her, and it's like this really tense, scary moment. He's reaching for her, she's screaming, she's trying to get away from him, and then he just takes his horn and starts honking it aggressively at her, and I'm like, dude, you're so unserious. And I think that kind of helps, like, because when you think about what you would call slashers in horror movies, like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees have this sort of silent, like, they're a brute force of nature. They just move through slashing and hacking and throwing people around. Freddy has this sort of like comedic Freddy and Chucky kind of have this comedic cosmic energy with like these one-liners. You take and like these one-liners, these goofiness, and then you have Leatherface, who has this just unhinged, crazed way of dispatching of his victims. So you take the amalgamations of all of these characters and you put them into one bin, and you get Art the Clown. You have this silent killer who is just a violent force of nature, who's just breezing through Miles County, tearing through everything as he goes. But then he's not doing one-liners like Freddy and Chucky, but he's using his facial expressions, he's using his body language, he's using the props, the sets, everything around him to sort of convey this like unserious, like, I don't give a crap, like, I don't give a fuck about y'all. Like, he's using this sort of unserious like behavior, which sort of like, it's like a nice balance. And then, like, of course he does these violent, crazed killings like Leatherface. This man is just really good at balancing. Like, David Howard Thornton is really good at balancing those two things, and I think like he is like such a good actor. And I know he's in a lot of indie stuff, but I really hope he gets into more mainstream stuff, because he's a really good actor, and he's really good with the physicality of presenting a character, and I love that. So yeah, but this movie just kind of like has its moments where it's super goofy, and then like super, like creepy and unsettling, and ooh, I don't like that. And I will say, it's definitely not for the faint of heart for people who don't like blood, guts, and gore. It's more for the faint of heart than the second one is, I guess I can say. But it definitely, I mean, the bisection scene, as goofy as it looks to me, like, not goofy, like, they did a good job with it, but like, I'll get to it in the second part. But as unrealistic, I should say, as it looks to me, there is still a little twinge of pain that I feel when he starts sawing the woman in half, because of where he chooses to sawing her in half. There's a little bit of pain, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, you were wrong for that, Art. You're wrong, because I can only imagine how much that hurts. uh so that would be like the good things I really like about Terrifier. But the things I don't like about Terrifier, because of its shorter runtime, it leaves a lot to be desired in the story elements. I think it's one of those movies that you have to turn your brain off almost entirely to enjoy. Um, for me, I've always been somebody that I appreciate a solid story, a really good story. And I think if I didn't understand, like I had a good time watching this movie when I first watched it last year, but it was one of those movies that, like, when I walked away from watching it, I had like a low opinion on. But then the next day we went to see the panel, and I was like, this kind of elevated my opinion of this movie because I saw how passionate you guys are about what you do. So I kind of forgive you for the first movie being so empty and devoid of substance. Because for me, I don't mind gore, but there has to be a purpose. It can't just be like, here's a bunch of blood and a bunch of guts and a bunch of people getting cut up and ooh, look at that. Like, that was kind of how I felt about Saw for a long time, until I actually sat down and like not the first movie, but like the subsequent sequels, because the only Saw that I had ever seen was the first and the third when I was younger. And I saw the first one and I said, hey, this is a pretty solid movie. And then I saw the third one and I said, what the heck is that? That is nothing but torture, like, torture corn, as you would say. But I when I rewatched the Saw series last year, the first three are very solid, and they have a solid continuous story that is gripping, and the gore is just part of it. And then after that, it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. But that's kind of how I feel about like the later Saw sequels, and even like Hostel. I won't watch that movie ever again. It's just gore for the sake of gore. That's how I feel about how I felt about Terrifier. But the only reason I respect Terrifier more is because I see the passion, I see the vision, I see the drive, and then watching the franchise grow the way it does in the second movie, I'm like, okay, I have so much respect for this. So even though the first movie doesn't have a story, it's just pretty much art chasing women through an abandoned apartment building and offing them in the most brutal and horrific ways. Uh, I don't care. Like, it's still a good time. And also because of the shorter runtime and the you know budgetary restraints, probably time restraints, none of the main characters are likable or interesting to follow. Tara, who was originally posed as to be our like final girl, um, she's not interesting. She's just like a random girl walking around. We know nothing about her other than she was at a party with her friend. Dawn, the woman who unfortunately gets bisected, was just the typical blonde bimbo. And Vicky, we know virtually nothing about her other than she's a college student that's really into her studies, and then she stumbles upon this graphic scene and then gets her face eaten off. They've definitely expanded from what I've heard in the third movie on the character of Vicky, so I'm really excited to see where she goes from here, because the Terrifier 2 leaves you in a really interesting position with her, a very interesting position with her. But yeah, no, I definitely like think that they didn't really create characters that were interesting or engaging aside from Art. Art was really the only character that you were engaged in, which is kind of a disappointment because he's supposed to be the villain. And again, like I always say about slashers, the problem is they get you rooting for the villain. You forget that you're watching a horror movie. And that's kind of how I feel about that. Okay, don't come for me. The gore in the first movie and in the second movie, but we'll get to that later. But the gore in the first movie is very unrealistic to me. And I know they try to work so hard to make it look as realistic as possible. But I say this with the utmost respect. The moment I can tell that it's moved to some form of prosthetic, that's when you lose me. The bisection scene was something I had always heard about, being like, oh, it was a moment that turned people's stomachs. People were like, people were talking about like having to turn the movie off at that scene. I watched it. I'm like, you literally see the moment where it goes from it being a live actress screaming to it being just a silicone body that he's cutting through with like entrails pushed and pumped through it, probably some like raw meat and stuff, and like fake blood and all that stuff. And that kills it for me. Like that moment when you see the turn. I think what makes movies with really good gore effects so great when they do more realistic things is the ability to kind of blur the line between what's real and what's fake by not really prolonging some of the more graphic, horrific shots, only because it's really hard to make those look realistic without like getting in trouble. It's really hard to make those look realistic. It's great that he wanted to show us the entirety of the bisection scene. Would have been a lot better if he chose to cut away and before we really saw how bad it was, or chose to close up on areas that weren't like the face or like the top, like the part that would be expressive, because you could clearly see like how silicone it looked. And yeah, and again, that's not saying that they didn't do a good job, because the gore effects are still really well done and they fascinate me, and I'm like, I would love to see how you guys do it, like just watch you guys make these things. But for it to be something that would turn my stomach or make me want to like vomit or pass out, it just doesn't do it for me personally. Like, I know there's people that can't handle gore that might have stumbled upon this movie that was like too much for them, but for me, I'm like, you can see that it's fake. Like that kind of ruins it for me a little bit. Is you can see how that's just a like a body, like a fake body stuffed with something. And it's because that shot lingers way too long to show you the entire cut of her body in half. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get what you're going for. You're trying to do the shock factor of watching all of her organs spill out and all that stuff, but it kind of defeats the purpose when I'm looking at the face of the body double, the puppet. I keep calling it a puppet. I don't know what to call it, but the mannequin, and looking at the face of it, and I'm realizing that it's not moving. It doesn't look realistic. Its eyes are glued shut. Yeah, it just doesn't look realistic. So it kind of ruins it for me when I'm like, oh yeah, you're not even seeing the fear on her face, because how could you see the fear on her face? She's not really getting cut up. Which is fine. She doesn't need to be, but I'm like, it definitely would have been better to have cut away from that scene, even though it would have maybe lost the impact of the gore effect. It would have been better just so that the next time you really got a good look at her, she was completely cut in half. And then it's like, okay, yeah, like your mind knows that's not real. But it's still giving the illusion that she actually got cut in half. So yeah, I do think I do think it is fascinating to watch and see how they made those things. Like I would love to see how they made these effects, but it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, yeah, it doesn't nauseate me, which I guess is a good thing. Personally, for me, it's a good thing that it doesn't nauseate me, because I don't want it to. I don't like watching gory horror movies that make me feel sick. Like, I'm so good. Like, I'm so good. So for me, like, this is perfect because it kind of has this little bit of fantasy to it, where it's not super hyper realistic and gross and disgusting. It's still got realism to it, but it threads the line just enough where I can tell this is definitely fake, and I don't feel nauseated because I'm like, oh, okay, that looks cool. I guess in some ways it's not entirely a con, but I guess like for the purpose of like, it's the most disgusting thing you'll ever see in your entire life, it's kind of a con, a little bit, just like a marginally tiny bit. All right, so now that we've talked about Terrifier 1, Terrifier, now we could talk about Terrifier 2, because I just watched it last night, so it's a little bit fresher in my brain. So let's talk about the things that I liked about Terrifier 2, because there's quite a bit I liked about this movie. It pushes the envelope from the moment it opens on gore. The entire scene with the coroner, the entire scene with the coroner in the beginning of that movie, it kind of sets the tone for what you're about to see for the rest of the movie. It's pretty vile. It's pretty vile. I ain't gonna sit here and lie. Watching Art rip this man's eyeballs out of his head to try to see if he can find one that fits his head because he's missing an eyeball. Scalping a man. It's very, it's kind of like it goes 0 to 100 after that opening credits starts. It goes 0 to 100 and you're like, oh, this is what we're getting into. We're definitely getting into this. It is very, very, very awful. Um, I mean, it caught me by surprise because it really, I mean, it literally picks up right where the first movie left off, and just goes straight into the violence and the vile nature of Art the Clown. This one, 100%, the second movie for Terrifier 2, 100% solidifies Art as one of the horror greats of all time. I don't care what anybody says. You guys can fight me. This man has earned his place in the Hall of Fame. Um, he is going to be like this generation's Michael Myers. Like he's the new gen. The younger horror fans that are into this movie and finding this movie and they're really liking it. This is their Freddy Krueger, their Michael Myers, their Jason Voorhees, their Ghostface. This is that character for them, and I'm really like super pumped to see that because I think we've gone long enough without a solid slasher to define a generation. I mean, you had the slashers of the 70s, the slashers of the 80s, slashers of the 90s, didn't really have a slasher in the 2000s. Um, kind of had a little bit. I mean, I guess technically you had a slasher in the 2000s because you had Jigsaw, and he kind of spilled over into the 2010s. The 2010s was kind of like a battle of all the previous slashers, but there wasn't really anybody that reigned supreme. And now you have in the 2020s Art the Clown. And this movie just solidifies it. He is diabolical. He is maniacal. The things he does to people in this movie should be illegal. And I know it only gets worse in the third movie. There is just to go off on a few things I can remember. Of course, like I said, he stole a man's eyeballs and bashed his teeth in. Oh, and stole his quarters to go to laundromat, which is, you don't take a man's quarters when he's already down. There's impaling somebody with a broom handle. There's genital mutilation again, but this time on a man. There's the entirety of the bedroom scene, which honestly, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the entirety of the bedroom scene, there's throwing acid in the face. There's making a whip with scissors at the end and whipping people with the scissors. There's making like a weird hammer thing with forks and blades and smashing people's heads in with a, like, this man is doing so many things in this movie that I'm just like, this is all bad. Why are you making him do all of this? There was firing at somebody from point blank range that did not end well. There's just so many like things that he does in this movie that I'm just like, dude, come on, man, come on. That one, so I will say he definitely gets solidified as he is a horror icon. I will not be taking notes. He is the new generation of slashers. He's the slasher for the 2020s. He's the slasher for the teenagers and the 20 somethings of this era, and I'm here for it. I fully support Art the Clown on that endeavor. Not everything else he does, but on that endeavor, I support him. Um it crafts a very compelling story with interesting characters. Now, there are beats within the story that I would love to see get expanded upon. Um, I think it was really interesting with Sienna's character, what she ends up like representing, and they don't really go into too much detail about why she is like connected to art and like what that whole, maybe in Terrifier 3 they do, I don't know. But overall the story was, there was a story here. You got characters with depth. You got characters, that actually had some form of like journey that they had to go through throughout the movie. And while many of them were, yes, just sacks of meat for art to cut through later on, they were characters that you spent some time with and you kind of got to know their personalities whether you liked them or not. There were quite a few characters that I was very tired of. Well, I'll say there was two. There was the mom in this movie that I was just waiting for her to get dispatched, and then the friend Brooke, who took the acid to the face, and to be quite honest, that was deserved for everything that she did in this movie, including getting pissed at her friend for having a panic attack. Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? So, but there were interesting characters. There were characters I was a little bit more invested in. Characters I actually enjoyed seeing. So I'm here for that. it does establish a solid final girl in Sienna who goes head to head with Art and holds her own throughout. There was a little bit of Hail Mary thrown in there, but overall, like Sienna is she's kind of a little bit of a badass, and I'm excited to see because I know they said that in I know I've seen that in Terrifier 3 she is like a formidable opponent for Art, and I can't wait to see what they do with her because she's very good final girl. Like she is again, so this generation's Laurie Strode, this generation's Sydney Prescott. Like we're here for it. She is the final girl. She's she's here. She's ready to go. Um, I loved her, and her brother was cool too. I mean, yeah, I don't. I mean, he survived, so like he should kind of get his flowers too. But it was really all about her towards the end because she took Art out. She took Art out, and then finally, I guess something else to say really about Terrifier 2 other than the Clown Cafe song is a bop. And if you've never heard it, I'm not gonna play the entire thing, but I will throw a little clip in right here.
Drop on by the Clown Cafe, your favorite meals on wheels. The menu is disgusting and it's full of special deals.
If you want to hear the whole thing, I'll leave the link to the video in the description. But yeah, that song is it's an earworm. It gets stuck in your head. It's a good song. So, okay, what could be different? There's not much because I really did like this movie. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. The first thing I will say though is what the first one lacks in story, the second one overdoes in having too much story. Like the movie is great, but it is over 2 hours long, and I'm not complaining because the movie is so good, and I know if I were to watch it again, like it's not going to feel like 2 hours. But it got to a point towards the end of the movie when I was watching it last night that I was like, wait, we still have more movie? We still have more movie? Like there's still more happening, and there's a mid credit scene. There's a mid credit scene, like I was like, listen, I know this is a passion project, but that's too much passion. I'm kidding. No, but no, for real. Like, it really felt like it was a long movie. I mean, at one point I looked at my phone and I was like, it is almost 11 p.m. We started this movie at like 8:50 or so, and I'm like, geez, this movie is like a behemoth. Again, not necessarily a terrible thing. It just caught me off guard because I was expecting it to be kind of in the same vein as the original, where it was short, sweet, and to the point. So this one kind of caught me off guard with the length, the sheer length, and the sheer amount of like information that was packed into it. It flows really well, but there was a lot packed in. Um, despite, and then the other thing I will say here is, despite hearing how like disgusting and nauseating that the gore like was, and how people were puking and fainting, which I do think was kind of like a like what's the word I'm looking for, a marketing ploy. I do think that was a marketing ploy to get people talking about the movie personally. um Even with all of that, the gore still looked really corny and cheesy to me, which again was a good thing. I will say the worst scene, of course, was the bedroom scene. However, that whole scenario was just so unrealistic for me that it didn't even disgust me so much, as I was more like, how? How is she still alive? And how did that all work? How did that all work? How did you cut through? How did you rip through bone? How did you? You're using kitchen knives, sir. That doesn't work like that. Like, it would take a lot longer, and that scene went by so fast. Like, and honestly, I was expecting that scene to be a lot longer with the way people described that scene. I was expecting it to be super long and like take up a good chunk of the movie, but it goes by like that. Like, it is so fast, and like, you know, before you even have a chance to really like take in what you just saw, you're kind of like, oh, well, it was the bedroom scene everybody was talking about. Okay. It is still nasty. Again, if you're somebody who has like a weak stomach for that type of stuff, definitely no, I would not recommend ever watching Terrifier 2, because like, if the opening doesn't make you want to barf, then that scene definitely will. It didn't make me feel that way. I was just kind of like, I think I was more like, wow, this is crazy how like um he's just cutting through bone and ripping bones in half and stuff like that. And then like at the end of that scene, when it's revealed to her mother that she's still alive while he's still cutting into her, like cutting chunks of her leg out. Um, I was kind of like, oh, okay, how? I think the trauma of it all put you out, would have put you out completely. Like, I'm just saying, I think the trauma of it all would have like ended you. Um, Not to mention the loss of blood everywhere, but yeah. So the gore still had a little bit of a phony tone to it. But overall, I mean, I do think that the gore effects stepped up from the first movie, and if they stepped up from the first movie, I can't imagine how bad they are in the third movie, because they were a little bit better in the second movie. There was a lot more realism. I definitely think that with the bedroom scene, that they did use a live actress for most of that scene and just put her in progressively worse conditions, physically. And then, like, some of the other scenes that were more graphic, I think they kind of did the same thing. They used actresses until they were like doing something that was completely, like, impossible, like something with the head or anything like that. So I will say they stepped that up, definitely stepped that up. um yeah. Also, I want to know what Art's fascination was with cutting people in the eye in this movie, because he was doing a lot of eye cutting in this movie, which was ow, ow. But yeah, no, that's probably the only other thing I would say about Terrifier 2 was that, yeah, the gore was definitely a step up, but it still wasn't, like, to me, to hear these stories or to hear people like, oh, it was the most disgusting thing. Like, oh, I couldn't even look at the screen. I'm like, it didn't look that bad. I'm not trying to say that to be like, oh, I'm so tough, I'm so cool, duh, duh, duh. I'm not trying to say it to be like that. I'm just saying, like, I expected it to really, especially me, because I do have a weak stomach. Like, I will say this, like, if it looks super realistic, it will make my stomach turn. The more realistic it looks, the worse off I am with it. Yeah, that didn't really do anything for me. I was just kind of like, all right, cool. Like, that's violent and awful to see happening. So yeah, that's pretty much it on Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 1. Um, so we got to get into our final thoughts now. We're wrapping this baby up. So, thoughts. I'll be completely honest. I never had the desire to watch the first Terrifier movie, really. I didn't really care for All Hallows Eve. I don't even really remember much about it. I'm pretty sure I watched it during a specific time for myself, not a bad time, but a time I can't talk about. Um, but I'm pretty sure I watched it during that, and I just wasn't. It didn't captivate me. It didn't like mesmerize me. Um, so I really didn't have any desire to watch Terrifier, and I don't think I ever would have if it wasn't for having to do the podcast episode I did last year. I don't think I ever would have watched that movie, or at the very least, it would have taken me years and years, even after these ones came out, to like sit down and finally be like, okay, I'll see what the hype is about. After watching the first movie, like I said, going to Spooky Empire and seeing that panel and seeing how dedicated that everyone is to this, like, franchise, it's given me such a huge respect for Terrifier in general, and for the cast and the crew and the people, everybody that works on it behind the scenes. This is an indie film. Originally, it was a really low budget film. It was a film that I don't think anybody saw becoming what it is today. And to be quite honest, seeing that kind of rags to riches story in this way, and also knowing that Terrifier 3 has been the number one movie for the last 2 weekends in a row, like, for me, regardless of what you think about the movie, regardless of whether you think it goes too far, or you like Art the Clown, or you think he's terrifying, regardless of all of that, it is so impressive to see an indie horror film do something to that magnitude. And it makes me undeniably proud of them, because after seeing them all on stage and listening to them talk about this movie the way that they did, I felt very, like, honored to be in their presence. It's so weird to say. I felt honored because the thing is, I'm gonna get on my soapbox a little bit here. I'm sorry. The thing is, Hollywood, and especially when it comes to horror, doesn't know how to handle horror a lot of the times. They will pump out, Hollywood in and of itself is all about remakes, capitalizing on nostalgia, you know, bringing audiences that grew up in the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s back to the theaters by reviving franchises that we loved. You know, you had Ghostbusters revival. You had I almost said Ghost Face revival, Scream revival. You had an Evil Dead sequel. Like bringing all of these things back to the theaters to get people in the seats with stuff that's familiar, stuff that feels warm and cozy. And when they do take a risk and they do take a chance on something new, oftentimes it's hit or miss of whether it's going to be well received. It's very, you have varying different opinions. I mean, look at almost every single A24 horror movie that's come out. Some of them are very beloved and considered some of the best pieces of cinema ever made, and some of them are considered absolute garbage dumpster fires. And for some people, those movies are different. Like, while I love Hereditary, there are many people I know who think it is one of the worst movies they've ever seen, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But it shows you how split audiences can be and how a lot of audiences aren't willing to take risks on movies that they're not familiar with, which is why movies that are franchises usually do so, so well. Reviving things that people care about usually do so well. And that's the reason why I do appreciate directors like Jordan Peele and Ari Aster and like even Zach Kreger. As much as I don't like the movie Barbarian, I gotta appreciate him for trying something different and trying to bring people into a new world. And then you have people that are pumping out lackluster horror movies like Smile and Trap and Tarot that I reviewed earlier this year, that are just they're all right. They're not the worst movies in the world. I haven't seen Trap yet, and I haven't seen Smile too, but like they're not the worst movies in the world, but they're definitely just all right, and they're not like they have their audience and they're made for a certain demographic, but they're just okay overall. Um, and it's really hard to bring people in to find something that they love. And yes, I'm not going to sit here and say Terrifier is beloved by every single person in the world. IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes is living proof that a lot of people don't like this franchise. There's a lot of people who, upon the announcement that Terrifier 3 was the number one movie in the box office, immediately came in with hateration. They immediately were like, that's only because there was nothing else to go up against aside from the terrible Joker movie. That's only because, there's weirdos who think Art the Clown is cool and you're disgusting. And even horror fans, even people who are genuine horror fans that just don't like the Terrifier movies because they just consider them like torture pee, they were even saying that about people who want to go see Terrifier. Oh yeah, you just like all that hack and slash and gore and all that you just want to see all the vile stuff he does, and you don't really care, you don't really have any like. And normally that's something that I could step back and go, yeah, I kind of agree with that opinion. I mean, I just literally had that conversation with my brother the other day, talking about how like the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey series infuriates me because there's no heart in it. But that's the thing that people don't understand. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, a movie like that is strictly just gore trying to ruin your childhood, has no heart. It has no heart. And I don't mean like it's a fun movie to watch. The thing about Terrifier is when you watch that movie, you can feel the blood, sweat, and tears from every person that stepped on that set. You can feel the excitement, the energy, and that they're just putting all of their love into this movie. Whereas a movie like Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, it's like, we're just making something bad and we're just trying to have a good time with it. And we know you guys are going to watch it because you want blood, guts, and gore and depravity. And that's like, we don't really care. Like, we don't really care. And that's the thing that's missing from a lot of even modern cool horror movies that we all like. The reason why a lot of my favorite horror movies are my favorite horror movies, even if they're not fun to watch, like Hereditary, I've said before many times over, Hereditary is my favorite horror movie of all time. The reason why I like that so much is because you can feel the passion in that movie. You can feel the passion that Ari Aster has for his project. You can feel the passion that the actors have for the project, that it's there. You can feel that they're passionate about what they're putting out. And that's what these movies, the movies I like, do, is that there's an enjoyment in watching, because you know that the people that are making the film, everyone from the people who are writing it all the way down to the people that are, putting on the hair and doing the hair and the makeup that day, they're all passionate about bringing this project to life. And Damien Leone has so much passion for this creation that he's made, so much drive, so much heart, that even though this movie is, yes, a gore fest, a schlocky, very 80s coded gore fest, um, it's still enjoyable to watch because the person who's writing it and directing it is putting every ounce of passion into what he's doing. And even like, I wish I had taken videos when I had gone to that panel, but I was so in the moment listening to them just talk. If I can find any, I'll look on YouTube and see if I can find someone's video of just when Damien Leone was talking about how hard he worked while he was working a job and then also writing and making these movies, like, and the passion he puts into it. It's inspiring, and it really makes you think, this is what movie making, this is what filmmaking is all about. Yes, okay, you can dislike the Terrifier series, you can hate Art the Clown with everything in you, which I'm going to disagree with you on, because David Howard Thornton is an American treasure, and I will stand by that. Love that man. He's great. He's wonderful. Hats off to you, David, if you ever see this. I know you probably won't, but if you ever see this, hats off. I'm taking my hat off for you. No, I gotta put it back on. My hair looks a hot mess. Okay. Um, but yeah, hats off to David Howard Thornton. Even if you don't like Art the Clown, even if you don't like the Terrifier series, you think it's just nothing but gore, blood, guts, and gore, hack and slash. There's nothing important about it, nothing good about it. You have to respect that these people actually give a shit about what they're putting out, more so than some of the big Hollywood bigwigs that are pumping out another Insidious movie. Or let's say pumping out another Conjuring. Yeah, I'm getting really, really personal here. James Wan, please stop doing this. Please just let their franchises die. Just let them, when they're done, just let them be done, okay? Don't keep reviving them. Sometimes you just gotta say, okay, we did what we came here to do. We're done. Or, you know, killing Michael Myers at the end of a movie, in 2022, and then deciding you're going to make a whole TV show about Michael Myers. Again, I'm just saying, a lot of Hollywood has lost its heart when it comes to filmmaking. And I think the reason why Terrifier is so popular and why it is the number one movie right now, it probably won't be forever, but why it is where it is because it has heart and passion, and people want that from their cinema. And then there's also those people that just want to see a bunch of people get cut up. Like, let's be honest, there are some people that's the only thing they care about. But yeah, that's my little soapbox moment real quick. I just think that Art is a brilliant slasher. I think that these movies are a lot of fun, very creepy. Art is terrifying. They deserve just so much praise, and it's just, being that they're indie films through and through, to me, the Terrifier series is living proof that there is an audience for everything, and studios shouldn't be afraid to take risks. Terrifier was a huge, huge risk, but by God, has it more than paid off. It's exactly what horror is supposed to be. And I myself, I don't know about you guys, but I myself am 100% here for it. So, what's my skull rating for these two movies? Well, the first Terrifier movie, I believe last year, I think I gave it like a 3 out of 5. I upped it to a 4 this time. And Terrifier 2 sits at a 4.5 skull rating because it is easily one of my favorite movies I've seen in a long time. And I am just so excited to see Terrifier 3. Can't wait. Gonna be my Christmas movie watching. We love the sound of screams at Christmas time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me on this impromptu detour to Miles County to see Art the Clown. This was definitely not what I planned for this week, but hopefully everything goes well and you guys are actually seeing this video this week, and then we can get ready for next week's content. I have my one video that I told you guys I was working on. It's a secret, but it's not really a secret. It's a review, but it's a secret. And then I also have my final HHN video that I'm going to be doing my comprehensive, like, my last hurrah, because HHN will be ending in like a week and I'm so sad. And then, of course, I will be revisiting my interview with the vampire video. I will probably be breaking that up into 2 parts just to make it easier on myself. But as always, let me know what you guys think. If you guys like the Terrifier movies, let me know. If you don't like the Terrifier movies, that's fine too. It's okay to be wrong. No, I'm kidding. If you don't like the Terrifier movies, go ahead and tell me why you don't like them. That's totally cool. I'm fine with that. You know, I love hearing everybody's different viewpoints. You can find me on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm on none of them right now actually, but I will be back on them. I'm on Threads and Instagram as underscore creepy critiques, and I'm on TikTok as just creepy critiques. I will be rolling out. I haven't. I'm just gonna keep it a little bit of a secret, but I'm gonna say I will be rolling out a blog soon, but I'm not gonna put any information yet because I'm still working on making it usable right now. So I'll be rolling out a blog soon. You guys will get to see that. My blogs, I will explain them, and when I'm rolling them out, I'll explain in a little bit more detail what they're going to entail. But you guys will have access to a little bit more content from me. Yeah, but you can follow me on Instagram, Threads, and on TikTok and see what I'm up to. I think that's it for housekeeping stuff. I will see you guys next week. Yeah, I will see you guys next week. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you all again with another creepy critique.